Herkese merhaba. Bugün küresel görünümde özellikle küresel ticaret, yatırım ve jeopolitik dinamikler konusunda dünyanın önde gelen uzmanlarından biri olan Profesör Simon Evenet'la birlikteyiz. Kendisi IMD Business School'da ekonomi ve strateji profesörü, Dünya Ekonomi Forumu Küresel Ticaret ve Yatırım Konseyi eş başkanı. Aynı zamanda Global Trade Alert gibi küresel ölçekte referans kabul edilen projelerinde yaratıcısı. Kendisiyle 2025'in ilk 7 ayında küresel ticaretin geldiği noktayı konuşacağız. Mr. Evenet, thanks for joining our program.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Evenet, if I ask you the balance sheet of this past 7 months, what would you say in a nutshell?
We have seen the United States recalibrate its trade policy. It has made significant changes to the treatment of over 100 countries' access to the United States market. Tariffs have been increased by between 10 and 41%. Countries are sorted into 6 groups. Together, these countries account for about 40% of US imports. There are some big countries, however, who have not seen their tariff treatment settled. These include the BRICS, Canada, and Mexico. And all of they still are unclear about the terms upon which they can export to the United States. And we expect to see some pretty high tariffs, especially already announced for Brazil and for India, and possibly also for Canada, Mexico, and China.
You have named lots of countries, but there are lots of uncertainties as well. So under Trump's trade tariff policies, who are the winners and who are the losers?
So there's one way of thinking about this, which is that although every country is now facing higher tariffs to sell to the United States, some are facing much lower tariff increases than others. So countries like the UK, which are only paying 10% more, are clear winners, whereas countries like Brazil, which will pay 50%, is a clear loser. India may end up being a clear loser as well, as may China. So much depends how much the tariff has gone up by and whether or not there's a relative tariff advantage, which some countries have compared to others.
Mm-hmm. Mr. Evenet, in a recent LinkedIn post, you wrote that United States has now antagonized at 5 of the original BRICS and questioned the grand strategy behind this. Could you please expand that a little bit? How do you see the underlying risks of this approach?
Yeah. So the Trump administration has, for different reasons, decided to take a very tough line on the 5 original members of the BRICS in terms of trade policies. It's unclear whether there is a grand strategy to confront the BRICS directly, but it does seem that the treatment of the BRICS is more severe than other countries. And I think it's probably an accumulation of different foreign policy grievances of the United States, in the case of India buying oil from Russia, or in the case of Brazil, the treatment of the former President Bolsonaro. So there are political idiosyncrasies as well. That is also true of South Africa. So essentially, I think the way to think about this is that the US trade policy has become like a Swiss Army knife to be used for all sorts of different or used for all sorts of different purposes, some traditional trade policy, some foreign policy, and some attempts to try and influence the internal politics of other countries.
Mm-hmm. So this is something interesting because you underline the fact that the U.S. trade policy is increasingly conditioned to non-economic objectives, such as foreign and security policy in the case of India. So how sustainable is this, do you think, in the coming future?
I think it's very sustainable. Please bear in mind that the United States, ever since 1945, has often conditioned its trade policy treatment of other countries based on its foreign policy and national security goals. It did this at the beginning of the Cold War. It has done that through the Cold War, and it has done that ever since September the 11th, 2001. So this link between trade and security policy, sometimes they are treated in different silos, but often they are mixed together. And we're going through one of the phases where they are mixed more and more aggressively, linking access to the US market to alignment with US foreign policy goals.
So do you think BRICS nations can form a cohesive bloc against US unilateralism in this trade? What would be the most realistic basis for this cooperation?
So the BRICS countries have often, at least in terms of rhetoric, been very critical of the United States' unilateral approaches. But the BRICS countries have been unable to align on an alternative approach in actual, tangible, first-order terms. I think a big part of the problem is that India and China have a very difficult time dealing with each other. And until those two countries come to some degree of understanding, the BRICS will be weaker and less coherent and cohesive than they could be.
How do you assess EU's current position against US trade policies?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Can you say it again, please?
How do you assess the position of European Union?
Oh. So the European Union's fundamental weakness in dealing with the Americans is that the Europeans need American military support for Ukraine. And this has become the paramount concern of the Europeans. And as a result, they have made concessions to the Americans in the area of trade policy in order to continue that military support. And so long as this defense relationship dominates the calculus in Brussels and in the member states, then the EU will acquiesce to demands. Let's be clear, the European Union is not happy with the demands which are being made of it, but they will go along with it so long as the Americans have the relative military advantage.
Mm-hmm. So, Mr. Evenet, how do you think Turkey fits in this big picture?
Well, Turkey is a member of NATO and so therefore is technically an ally with the United States, which may be very helpful. Turkey is also buying a lot of oil from Russia, which up until now has not really received too much attention in Washington, at least as far as I can tell. So as long as that stays the same, then Turkey will not be singled out for the treatment that India has been singled out for. I think much depends on whether the White House takes a dim view of Turkey's relationship with Russia or whether the White House accepts that there are many other benefits from having good relations with the government of Turkey.
Mr. Evenet, when you look at the economy and the markets, do you think there's a discrepancy? Sometimes the markets are pricing something different, but the real economy is something different. How do you assess this?
So this is a great question. The financial markets' job is to price the assets of companies that trade on the financial markets. They don't price the whole US economy. And so we may be going through one of these phases where the broader US economy is slowing down, where it may move into a recession in the next quarter or so. Yet at the same time, many of the very successful American companies are looking forward to higher profits and more growth now that tax cuts are happening and deregulation is on the way.
Mm-hmm. So last question, when you look at the 6 or 12 months ahead, what do you see the opportunities and the risks?
So what I see 12 months from now is that the US tariff policies will probably remain in place. We may end up with some type of settlement with Canada, Mexico, and China at higher tariffs than now. And then this will determine whether or not there is inflation in the US and whether or not there's a recession as well. For the rest of the world, that will probably mean that there will be a deflationary impulse. And all of us, including our viewers in Turkey, will feel the impact of a US slowdown or stagflation.
Mr. Simon Evenet, thanks for joining our program.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Goodbye.